Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar discussion video. This one is going to be some early speculation on the new Avatar comic, Katara and the Pirate Silver. So I'll be doing this in sort of two parts here. The first section of the video I'll just talk more about the direction of the comics, about the fact that this is a new format, what that means, my reaction to it, and then in the second part I'll go into my thoughts on story speculation and where this book could actually go, and so on. I think I should start off with just the fact that we have, since the video I did previously, we've had the proper announcement, the exclusive reveal of this thing we already know about. Comics Beat got the exclusive information, even though it was revealed days before. They added no new information whatsoever. It was basically just writing a news article around what we already saw on Penguin Random House. So that was kind of unfortunate. Like, there was no interview, there was no comment from Faith Erin Hicks or Peter Wortman, no information about what this sudden switch of format means or anything. Just, this is what the comic is, here's the cover, here's the description. Everything we already had. The only slight new thing was that they seemed to suggest that the comic store release date for the book was early October. I guess they just haven't confirmed that yet, because it's October 13th for mass market date and digital, I suppose. So yeah, if you haven't seen the announcement yet, here is the cover for the new comic. But yeah, so let's get into this. I already talked about this a little bit in my previous video, but I want to have a full discussion about it here. So the main positive I take from this is the new format. I like the idea that we seemingly now are able to tell stories that don't have to be three-parters and that don't have to be short story collections. We can finally just have one part, one book to tell a story. That's good, and I think that immediately opens the door to, we can do two-parters and four-parters or whatever, however long we need to. It's still the same form factor of each book is 72 pages, but even just opening up to, I suppose, just doing different numbers of volumes is good. That's one of the big things I've been asking for ages, and we're getting it. The problem with this announcement for me is the direction. The fact that they've chosen to go backwards, and that they've chosen to go backwards and set it during Avatar: The Last Airbender. They've chosen to set this new story, the first new story content announced in 2020, during ATLA, the most dense part of the entire timeline, where we already have everything. We know about the main characters' arcs and stories and pretty much everything that goes on. Because again, we have ATLA, The Lost Adventures sets a lot of its stories in between episodes. And now you're adding this in there as well. It just, to me, is not at all what I want, nor what I feel they need to do. Because I don't see the benefit of this. Why is it not just the same basic premise of this story, but set after ATLA, just to even in any way open the door to something new and interesting happening? By setting it there, you are basically telling us nothing particularly important is going to happen in this book. Otherwise, it would have been an episode of the show. Otherwise, it would have been referenced in the episodes that take place after where this is set. Because this has to be set somewhere between Season 2, Book 2, Episode 5, The Blind Bandit, which is when Toph is introduced, and Book 2, Episode 10, The Library, which is when the whole library/Bossing Say arc happens. And there's no time in the middle of that whole gap in the second half of Book 2 to fit it in. So it has to be set between 5 and 10. Somewhere, I think there's basically the opportunity to set it in between any episode in between there, just because of the way it works. Probably the most obvious example is that. Obviously Zuko alone is an episode that doesn't feature the gang. There's an opportunity for this Katara story to happen. But why is the first new announcement set during ATLA? Immediately, this is just the thing to make the attention towards this book and excitement towards this book much less. Because you'll notice that the book that has come out recently that's got the least amount of attention has been Team Avatar Tales. Like, no one talked about it. It's a book that just came and went, and no one cares about whatsoever because it didn't do anything important. And we thought it was going to be somewhat interesting because it was set after ATLA, but then it turned out that actually some of the stories were set during it. And it was just like, what was the point of that? And it's sort of the same thing here. Again, I'll talk more about the story itself in the second half of the video. This is more about just, we finally got our new announcement and it's not really what we wanted or asked for. What people have been asking for is to move the plot with the trilogies along quicker. So do an actual time skip so you can actually tell a story of an eventful part of the process towards Republic City. The problem is that it's been going so slow on that progress. It's being set up, but it's these tiny things of like, okay, the Water Tribe has a port now. Okay, this place is actually the sort of center point of Republic City. You've done that now. That's what Imbalance. That's the main takeaway from Imbalance. Cranefish Town is basically Republic City. That's really all that book had to say for the most part. Before we can get anywhere near actual Republic City, we need to skip ahead like 2-3 years at least to make something bigger happen, because we're nowhere near actually the formation of Republic City. So you either had to do that, big time skip, which a lot of people have been asking for, and just continue the same format, or you open it up and do a variety of different stories where you can tell stories that go back in time. You can tell stories, solo stories that are set in the time gap between Avatar and Korra, or anything else. The problem with going backwards is that they're not going backwards in the right way. You have an incredible amount of potential if you set a story in the past, as evidenced by the rise of Kyoshi. They basically had free reign to run with that time period with very little to get in the way of it, and they delivered an amazing novel. You have to keep in mind that the way the timeline is, you have so many open opportunities to tell stories in the history of this world. From Wan to Yang Chen, there's so many avatars that are just utterly unexplained. We have like one name from the Rise of Kyoshi novel, was it Avatar Salai, I think it is, but we know nothing about that character at all. You have all that gap, and then you have the other obvious things of like Iroh's backstory. Iroh's backstory is not set during ATLA, it's set prior to ATLA. So there's immediate potential with stuff that is like a prequel to Avatar The Last Airbender. The two obvious ones, like I said, are Iroh's full backstory, bringing together all of the little bits and pieces that we know about Liu Ten as a character, and then also the Air Nomad Genocide, which to me remains the most sort of... It's like the biggest event in the Avatar world that is utterly unexplained for some reason. The reason Avatar The Last Airbender is called Avatar The Last Airbender is because in-universe the Air Nomad Genocide happened, yet we know nothing about it. That's crazy to me. That's such a major event. Has only ever been explored in the trading card game. It's just absolutely incredible to me, and I don't know why they refuse to tell those type of stories. Similarly, there are one-shot stories that you can tell in the gap, like when does Aang find the Sky Bison? You're not going back into ATLA to do that. You're telling that in between the gap. How do we get from Avatar to Korra and we suddenly have all these bison? Show the story of that happening. Where does Zuko get Druk from? One-shot story focusing on Zuko getting the dragon egg. Tell us that. Why are you playing it so safe? Imbalance played it safe. Now this book is playing it safe by just the sort of sanctuary of setting it during ATLA. We don't have to do anything of note, of importance. We can just set it here. It'll be a story. It fits, kind of. That's it. It to me is just like, come on, like where's the risk? Like, actually do something with the characters, fill out the gaps, because everyone wants to know that sort of stuff. When do these two characters get married? When do they have their kid? What are they like as parents? I know it's a lot of the sort of just sort of fan servicey type stuff that we want to see, of just, you know, the couples being cute, their lives, all those kind of cute moments that aren't necessarily related to a story. But still, you know, touch on them rather than trying to make a story out of just like, okay, here's this event that happened, it's a big story with Katara. Because moving into speculation about the story itself, I think it's actually going to be a pretty fun book. Because, like, Katara, fan favorite character, on her own, interacting with pirates, out at sea, that's going to be new to a certain degree. Like, we don't have a lot of time on boats in ATLA or Korra, especially like setting it completely out on the open sea, like searching for islands and stuff like that, because we're so used to like Appa and we can fly everywhere, and there's only like a handful of times we are properly on boats necessarily. So there's definitely some cool aspects to that. But I think the issue is that it very much feels, just read the title, Katara and the Pirate Silver. It feels fillery just by when you say it. And I'm not someone who particularly calls a lot of Avatar episodes filler or anything like that. Like, you won't see a bigger defender of the Great Divide episode than myself. In that, like, I don't really consider it to be filler. But this, you know, leans more in that direction than I think it needs to. Because the idea here is that I think there is potential. I think exploring the idea of pirates in Avatar is a good idea. So you immediately have the question of, is it the group of pirates that we know, or is it a new group of pirates? This silver that they're searching for, did they bury it and are collecting it again? Or is it like a legendary treasure that they found out about? Is there a treasure map? Does this relate to like a legend in the world? Is this an ancient treasure from like a few hundred years ago, or what? Why silver specifically? Does it relate to a legendary pirate? Because that was one of the things about Rise of Kyoshi, of like when we met Tagaka and like the Fifth Nation. They were basically just pirates, you know, Dao Fei of the sea. We got that idea from like, okay, cool, pirates, you know, Water Tribe pirates, that seems fairly cool. The thing here, though, from the art is that it almost suggests Fire Nation pirates, because it looks like there's sort of a dragon painting on the front of the boat that Katara is on, which would suggest Fire Nation to some degree. Definitely look at the picture on the front of the cover quite closely, and you can see that it definitely to me looks like a dragon. The big snout, the kind of whiskery-like things that the dragons have coming off them. You know, the thing that like Fang touches Aang on the forehead with to activate the whole vision thing in that episode. That thing, you can see them on the front. The fangs and the teeth, you can see. It's not a full image, but it to me most resembles a dragon from any animal we've seen in Avatar. And obviously dragon is a Fire Nation animal. And while it doesn't mean no other nation can ever use dragons anywhere, that seems to be the suggestion at the very least. So that's somewhat interesting. Like, okay, maybe a new group of pirates from the Fire Nation, potentially from one of the Fire Islands, not necessarily affiliated with the Fire Nation military or anything like that. You know, Katara escapes from the Fire Nation attack, comes across these pirates, or like they capture her or something like that. She ends up proving to be useful. They use her to, you know, help guide them towards the treasure, because, you know, her water bending can be important when they're sailing. You can see the potential for like just a fun story that relates to like a mystery of the Avatar world in some way, exploring the idea of pirates a little bit more, and then just playing off the idea of Katara having to really act tough, you know, really keep her guard up around pirates. That fits to me. That's the potential for a decent story. I think the main issue is just that there's no real potential for, like, I suppose, proper character growth necessarily, just because we know what happens afterwards. And like the most you could ever do probably is like link it into the desert, and like, oh, Katara's like a big leader in the desert as she like guides everyone out, and she really keeps the team together. Maybe she learns some of that leadership qualities from being part of this, you know, pirate crew or something like that, whatever, for a certain amount of time. Maybe some of her waterbending skills that she uses when on boats, she learned from interacting with pirates, and maybe there's one pirate waterbender who knows a lot of cool waterbending moves that relate to moving boats quickly, or whatever. You know, you can do smaller things like that of like, okay, she learned some skills that, you know, now have sort of a story to them. She has now a little bit of extra context for some of her more notable moments. Perhaps. It's definitely a little bit of a stretch. It's not exactly like, yeah, we needed to spend all this time for this one graphic novel just to basically set up those moments. So it's not that I'm just completely like, no, this story is bad. Like, we just do not need it at all. It's more of the case of, it really depends on what else gets announced. If this is just our sort of, you know, bonus extra among another big Avatar comic that's important, then finally maybe the Korra comic goes to the Fire Nation and they announce some other comic as well, then great, that's fine then. You are now confirming to us that we're going to be getting like 2 regular series, and then we'll always have sort of a separate, you know, solo story going on at the same time. That's great. That's the sort of announcement I'm sort of ultimately waiting for, that we now have this ongoing thing of, we're still continuing our main Avatar story post ATLA. We're still continuing Korra post Book 4, going onwards. But then we also have this other kind of option, this third kind of pillar of Avatar comics, where this is the book that can change and almost be anything. It can tell a story in ATLA. It can go forward and tell a story here, or here, or here. It can be Avatar, or it can be Korra. That's what I want to see. But if you want my opinion just purely on Katara and the Pirate Silver, to me it seems like an at most maybe 7 out of 10 book right now. Unless it really blows us away and surprises us with something. Right now, purely based on what we know, I think there is just, they've set a limit themselves just with what the book is on how good it can be. And that is never a good thing to me with a comic. So the main thing I think they need to do to fix this is, I would hope that they potentially have some of the other comic announcements ready to go, and I would definitely move towards announcing them sooner rather than later, so we actually know the lineup. Because I am getting worried. This is probably one of the biggest things I'm worried about this year, and admittedly, some of this could definitely be down to the virus, of like, the lineup of books this year, especially Dark Horse books, doesn't look that great. Because you have to basically take away all the reprint books. Take away the Omnibus, the Promise Omnibus, and the 2 library editions for Runes of the Empire and Imbalanced. All you have is this Katara novel. This Katara one-shot graphic novel. It's the only sort of new piece of content post Runes of the Empire Part 3. Is this all there is this year? Because if they don't announce like the next Korra book in the next like 2-3 months, we're looking at 2021, and this is the 15-year anniversary. This should have been in a way like the big year, but it doesn't look like it's going to be, unless everything happens right at the end of the year. So I hope those other announcements happen soon, but yeah, right now, yeah, I feel very mixed on this, in that when this book actually comes out, I'm definitely looking forward to reading it, but I can also acknowledge at the same time, it's really not what we need. I would have been so much more excited about almost anything set in between in the time period that we didn't know about, rather than setting something during ATLA. I think there is so few gaps at this point in ATLA that are just like truly like amazing that we need to tell, that it makes the book better than anything else we could have got. Like, I can maybe see the potential for like a Suki solo book that explains her journey when she was away from the group after she met them in episode 4. There's a potential of like, that's something I think a lot of fans would like. Focus more on Suki, cover some of the stuff we didn't quite get to see, and just what she was up to. That sounds interesting, and you could maybe like cover her time being like imprisoned when she was captured, and you know, little bits and pieces like that. And I think this is where I have to bring up this point that I think so many people are not making, I think, a big enough deal about. This book is going to cost more than all of the other comics. This book is going to cost $12.99, whereas the individual parts of a trilogy, books parts 1, 2, or 3, all cost $10.99. So a $2 price increase for the same size of book. It's going to be the same small format and also only have 80 pages, so 72 pages of actual story. And yet they're charging $2 more for no explanation whatsoever. Just that it seems to be we changed format in terms of telling the story, but they haven't changed anything about the actual physical product that you're buying, and they're charging more for it. I think that is a point that has to be brought up, and it's definitely something that I'm going to, talk about, when the book actually comes out, and apply it to the review, that unless they announce that there's just going to be a general price increase across like all of Dark Horse's books, and we see all the other Avatar books, costing more as well. But I don't really buy that as being the excuse, because the Promise Omnibus edition was recently announced, and it is 216 pages at the same small form factor for just $24.99. So you're paying, a third of, like, you're getting a third of the content of an omnibus for half the price. It doesn't really work for me that well. And I get the omnibus is always going to be a saving over the 3 parts. 3 $10.99 parts is like $33, and that's obviously a saving. But this feels excessive for what's happening. But yeah, that's my discussion for today. We'll be discussing this on a podcast at the weekend as well, so you'll get more of myself and also Greg's thoughts on this and some of the other news. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on Katara and the Pirate Silver, both what you think the story will end up being, in addition to what you think the direction of the comics is, and why they chose to tell this story in the way that they did. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.